One of the biggest reasons people don't achieve their goals is because in training, their effort doesn't match their goals, or on race day, their effort just doesn't match their goals. Welcome back to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. My name is Will France. I'm a running coach and a strength coach, and the whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better so that we can have more fun out on the trails and perform how we want to. If you like this information, if you like this podcast, then I'd really appreciate if you hit subscribe or follow or whatever button on relevant platform tells the robots that you want to hear from me again. Um, or you can just share it with somebody. If that's too much to ask, I'd really appreciate it. Just spread it as much as you can if you think it's worth spreading. So today, before we really get into the main topic of effort and work in both training and on race day, I wanted to give a quick tip that I was thinking about. I was trying to figure out if I could make this into a full episode, but it just doesn't really feel worthwhile to talk about for 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time. So if you are training and you do too much on a set, and this could be either in lifting or it could be in running. And this would mean, like in lifting, maybe you're doing, say, 3 sets of 10, and your first set, or maybe 3 sets of 8 to 12. We'll give a range because it'll give a better example. And if we do first set, 10, great, right in the pocket. Your next set and you get 9, awesome, still there. It would make sense that maybe your third set would be 8 since you saw a single rep drop off. But sometimes for certain exercises, for certain people, can depend on the day. Whole load of factors go into this. But that third set, you might press the same weight, like only get 5. And might wonder whether you should like do another set or drop weight and try to get more reps in. And the real answer is it probably doesn't matter. Most of the time, you're going to be fine by just counting that third short set as a perfectly good set. You don't need to redo it. You still got a good stimulus, and clearly your muscles are tired. If we were trying to be a bodybuilder and you were trying to build as much muscle mass as possible, then there might be an argument for that, depending where you were in your training. For some, like even if you're late in your training and you're like on a big like dietary cut, I would still say probably not worth it. But for most of us, you put in the set, adding an extra few minutes to your workout to like get the appropriate rest period and add more weight to get what is realistically a really small like increase in stimulus just isn't going to matter. And we'd see the same thing on running. We need to be able to adapt on our like sets when it comes to speed work or whatever. If you do, say you have like a 5 by 3 minute repeat and you go out at a like 6 minute pace. And by the end of that first 3 minutes, you've had to slow down. You know it went really poorly. You're just tired. Maybe that's your normal pace. Maybe this is the first time you've done this workout in a long time and you just weren't quite sure what target to hit. But we just know by the end of that first set that like it wasn't right. Well, one, you definitely don't have to do it again. Like you don't have to do 6 sets now because the first set didn't go how you wanted it to go. You still got a good stimulus. Like unless you went out like a 4 minute pace and ended up like passing out at 40 seconds, like then we probably need to reassess and probably practically reassess our fitness level as well, because clearly our expectations just aren't where reality is. But let's say you went out a 6 minute pace and probably should have been like a 6:30, and the set just doesn't go super well, but it goes fine. Um, your next set, one, you don't have to redo it. And then your next sets, all you have to do, like pull them back. Like I see a lot of people go out and their first set like just doesn't go well, but because the target they thought they needed to hit was whatever minutes a mile, then they just try and hammer away at that for 4 more sets when clearly they're not there on that day. Right? Like our fitness changes, our fatigue level changes, is more accurate way to say your fitness isn't going to go up and down by the day, but the amount that you're fatigued, the amount you slept, your food intake, all of these things, our energy availability can greatly affect how we perform on any given day. So if you go out and you try to hit that 6 minute mile and you just like can't, you get 2.5 minutes into it and pace falls off and you end it at 7, like do the next set at 6:30. Don't try to just hammer your head into the wall in hopes that you're going to somehow feel so much better as you keep adding fatigue to yourself, right? Like we're looking for a stimulus. Unless you're on race day, then the actual pace doesn't matter as much. Like it's a good sign. We should use that. We should take note of that to see where we are. But you're doing a workout. What you're trying to achieve is a stimulus that will create an adaptation that makes you faster down the line. And if you happen to be fatigued, if you happen to be low on food because you just like food didn't go well yesterday for whatever reason, if your stomach doesn't feel good, if you're like nursing a like minor injury that doesn't affect how you perform, but like just kind of is sapping your energy, then we might need to pull back. And you're still going to get the stimulus that will create the adaptation. So it's okay. But let's not try to, push through and kill ourselves just because we had some magical pace in mind, right? You don't have to you don't have to redo or add or stick to a plan that's not serving you. Change the plan and realize that as long as you push the stimulus to get the adaptation, you're okay. Now, for the main topic of today, this goes in line, is like, does your effort match your goals? And this is going to be true for both training and racing. So we can see where this might fit depending on where we are. But I will say, probably not going to go into super deep detail on both of these things and how they might apply, but just to frame what we're looking for. If you want to run a like 3:30 marathon and currently you run a 3:45 marathon, we're going to have to be doing a lot of speed work to like not a lot, an appropriate amount of speed work for you that allows you to make that adaptation to take that time off your marathon. We are also going to need to, on race day, work hard. Like marathon is probably like a 20-mile warm-up for a 10K race, but the 20-mile warm-up needs to be great. You need to fuel, you need to be diligent through the entire thing. You need to focus. We need to have that last 10K be pretty brutal. Like it is going to be a difficult day if you actually want to hit that goal because we're trying to drop so much time off of your previous target, right? So either on training or on race day, you're going to have to put in a bunch of work to hit what is very likely for most people a stretch goal of dropping 15 minutes off a marathon. Like if you're new and that was your first marathon, then great. Probably some genetic like gifts there. But for most people, if they've been doing this for a while, dropping 15 minutes off of a marathon on like a pretty similar course, year to year when you've been doing this for a while is a massive target. So it's going to require a lot of work. Now, I don't care about your goals. Like that is to say like you get to choose them, right? I care what they are. I support you. That's why I do these things as much as I can. That's why I'm a coach. But I'm not here to pick your goals for you. That's not my purpose as either the random talking head on the internet or a coach for my athletes. They pick their goals, and then I tell them whether they're one, realistic, and two, figure out how to support them to do them if we're going to go for that, right? And you're allowed to have whatever goals you want. And I hope for you that that's a yeah, like no shit moment, but I think it's not for a lot of people. The internet is full of individuals like in my position talking about performance increases and like basically implying that if you're not training to improve your performance, then it's a waste of time, and judgy assholes who like basically want you to kill yourself in every training session. And I just don't think that's necessary. Like for one, it's not going to create the best performance. Like you need to do a lot of slow, easy work in order to build the volume that's going to make you better at running. And this is why like Garmin's beat yesterday thing is probably not really great for the actual running community, even though it probably is going to sell a lot of watches to people who are trying to get motivated to run their first race, right? So we got to like thread this line. But you're more than allowed to sign up for a race to do something. And like, say it's a 100-mile race and it has a 32-hour cutoff, and you just want to do something like pretty hard and spend 32 hours moving through the woods, like have pacers the whole time, cruise it, walk a lot, hike a lot, push hard, like be toasted by the end, but do something very achievable. You can do that. And if you could do that race in 24 hours, um, you can just decide to do it in 31 and have a long, exhausting day in the woods with people, right? Like that is an okay thing. But what is going to lead to heartbreak is if you go into it wanting, like more than anything, to get a 24-hour finish, to expect for it, to plan for it, to like put your nutrition in line for it, to do all this stuff, to tell everyone that you're definitely going to get this 24-hour finish or whatever matters to people. And then you do the work and you race like you want a 31-hour finish. And that's just going to lead to like frustration and exhaustion and not get you there, right? Like we have to match our work output to what we want out of our goals. And again, you can have whatever goals you want. People do running and this sport and trail running and hundreds for very different reasons. And you want to go out there and like spend 31 hours in the woods doing something hard, then that's awesome. But if you really want it to like challenge your upper end of performance, and then you go out as if you're going to spend 31 hours in the woods, then that probably isn't going to make you very happy. And to be clear, 31 hours in the woods might be your upper end of performance, and that's awesome. Probably is for me right now. Like I haven't done a lot of high volume recently. There's no judgment on that time. It's just a lot of races have a 32-hour cutoff. So I'm using it as an example. Finishing an ultra marathon, finishing any race is an achievement. Might not be an achievement for you, it is an achievement for someone. And for me right now, anything really long would be an achievement in and of itself, and it might be for you listening to this as well. That's great, but just have that framing, right? Now, when we look at goals, we should make sure that they match our schedule. Like, do you have kids? Do you have a particularly busy work life? Did you just have a new baby? Are you struggling to recover from an injury? Any of these things, right? Like, is now the time to be pursuing this high level performance goal? Like, I am we have to understand that not every time there's going to be no like perfect time in life, right? So if we constantly push stuff off to achieve goals that we really want to achieve, we're probably never going to achieve them because shit's just busy. Like that's a very real thing. Like we can always say, oh, this week is hard. I will do it next week. It's always going to be a very valid statement for most of us because life is just busy. We fill it. I forget the name of the law, but basically the amount of time you have is the amount of time you're going to take to do something, right? Like the task fills the space. And this tends to be pretty true of life as well. But if you are currently at a busy time of work where you're working a 60-hour week and going through a divorce and you have 3 kids and you just got a new puppy and all of this stuff, maybe training for a 100-mile race where you know at your peak you're going to have to be putting in at least 10-hour weeks in order to do it well just isn't the wise call right now, right? Like, does your time scale match your goals? And it doesn't have to be this like super long event in order to challenge yourself. I find a lot of value in doing like pretty hard training, pretty challenging training on a weekly, almost daily basis. And it doesn't need to have this big, long target in order to do that. Like, I'm fairly convinced that some, not all, but some people target longer distances because running fast is too hard. And if you let's say a person can just run a like 1:30 half marathon. I can't. And by just, I mean like they skate on their best day, they're going to skate under in like 1:29:58 or something like that, right? Like they can just run a hour and a half marathon. Really good time, right? Like, I'm not even close to that. And I mean, it's not professional, but it's certainly better than like the average person who's going to go out there and send it. Now, for that person who can just run an hour and a half marathon, is it easier to do that or a 4 hour marathon? The answer is probably a 4 hour marathon, unless they have some like connective tissue or knee damage or something like pre-existing, where the extra like double pounding of time is going to cause a lot of problems. From a cardiovascular and muscular standpoint, as long as they fuel well, then the 4 hour marathon is going to be less difficult for that person from a pure like overall stress perspective. And because if you pin it to the wall and crash across the finish line at a spot where you're like an hour and a half is where you just start to like really struggle with glycogen stuff, you're going to be wrecked for a while. It is going to do a lot of damage. Whereas if that same person goes out and runs a significantly slower pace, even for longer, they're not going to feel great. They might need a rest. They might need to take some time, but it's just not going to be as physically, technically difficult, barring again, like damage or connective tissue stuff, as the faster half. Running fast, like giving your all to a fast race, to a shorter, faster race is hard. And if you want to train hard and do hard things, but you don't have a lot of time, you're busy, any of these things are going on in your life that just like make it really difficult to commit to any of the longer stuff that we may want to do, then we can just train for shorter distances. Or not just, like we can train for shorter distances. Again, like running a really fast half is difficult. There's no just there. It's a tough thing to do. So but it doesn't have to take your entire weekend, right? Like you could like start to really be competitive in 5Ks. And if you push yourself really well in that, you could race like every other weekend or every third weekend pretty well because it doesn't take as much time to recover from them. The overall training volume doesn't take as much, right? And you can just do well at these shorter distance races without taking as much of our overall schedule, overall weekend, taking as much time away from our kids, etc., that we all really care about. Right. So if you want to do something hard, if you want to target, but your schedule is a mess right now and training for an ultra isn't realistic, then how about we push hard at a shorter distance? And when you get back to ultras, pushing hard at that shorter distance is going to set the like speed and upper end aerobic base of the house that's going to like build your aerobic fitness, right? Like I realize we talk about the foundation as this like grander aerobic slow work, and that's very valid. But when we look at higher level training concepts, we almost approach it like a funnel. So having a like base at the high end is important too, in order to funnel down to whatever target pace we're trying to hit. So getting some of that high end work by training for faster stuff is going to go very well. I think Eliud Kipchoge, before he was a champion marathoner, it's like a champion 10K or something like that, like the 1,000 meter on the track. Um, the speed, the faster, shorter stuff helps you do better at the longer stuff because you'll be faster. So we can target that for a minute, especially if our goals just don't match really well. Also, we should ask, do our goals match our actual priorities? A lot of people sign up for things because they think they're seeking some sort of motivation, right? Like if we have something on the calendar, um, it might get us into movement or working or running or things that we really liked in the past. If we have this hard goal, then we will maybe commit to actually doing the stuff that we think we should be doing in order to get there, right? People use races and goals and whatever as an effort to motivate themselves. And sometimes that works. Typically, even if it does work, if you didn't care about the thing in the first place, as soon as the race is over, you're going to stop doing it. And then we end up just reverting back to where we were. So we need to probably set some kind of long-term, um, develop some kind of long-term love or relationship or appreciation for what we're doing if we actually want to make this a target, right? If now, the way you actually spend your time, like if we look not at your calendar in terms of like scheduling, but if we look in retroactively at your calendar in terms of how you spent your day, that will be reflective of your real priorities. And if running is a priority, then you will do it. And if it is not, then you won't. And this tends to make some people really angry because they're really busy. And I totally understand that. And this might go back to setting goals that are relevant to your practical time of life. Maybe 3 miles a day is what you have right now instead of 10, and trying to hit 10 is preventing you from even doing 3 because we're making perfect the enemy of the good. We can also set habits and set up systems and do things and whatever to help make it easier to hit it if it's a lower level priority, right? There's a lot of tips to get you there. And this comes from anything from laying out running clothes the day before and buying gels and actually eating enough and prioritizing sleep and stopping drinking or whatever it is that's going to help you make that a bigger priority. Throwing your phone in gray mode, right? Because the amount of time that we probably spend on your phone is time you could be running very realistically. So you could get off of that for a long chunk of time. But the only thing that's gonna push you is some level of desire to do it, right? Like you should probably do something that you really want to do, or chase goals you really want to achieve so that doing the things you don't necessarily like aren't that insufferable because they're helping you support a goal, right? If you find yourself spending 5 hours a day on your phone and never running, then that's probably a good sign that running just isn't all that important to you. Um, the idea of running might be incredibly important to you, but the actual running apparently is not, because we could somehow make that fit with some rescheduling and work, right? So in that case, we should either figure out how to make running a priority, or we should set goals that match our actual priorities. And the way I see this most would be something like at the gym, right? I work with a lot of people whose primary goal is fat loss, and I don't talk about it a lot, even with them, because fat loss, like sustained long-term fat loss, is a result of just changing habits and doing stuff and just making it part of your life, right? Like you don't eat a block of cheese every day, or I don't drink much anymore, really at all. It doesn't really exist in my house because that's just not the priority I want to have. And these kind of adjustments are what we need to do. We train regularly because it's important to our life, and we do these things, and then it will eventually make that shift. And if it's not making that shift, or if you have a hormone thing or whatever, we probably need to see like a dietitian or a professional that would be above my standing anyway, right? What do we need for fat loss? Muscle mass, some level of dietary control, some form of cardio. For a lot of people, especially if they're new to this, might be walking some amount a day. Like running can fit into that last category, but it doesn't for most people. Like it doesn't need to be running, rather, I guess. Running is hard. Um, a lot of people who I train at the gym, if they came to me and just like decided to run 10 miles tomorrow, wouldn't, they'd get hurt. They wouldn't, hit their goals. They just end up injured, right? And most people don't want to spend time learning to do a fairly complicated, difficult activity that is just a, side route to their actual goal, right? So I'll ask them regularly, like, do you want to run? And if the answer is no, I hate running, then we're going to find something else that'll actually allows them to achieve their real priorities. If their real priority is fat loss or change or muscle gain or being able to play with their grandkids or improve osteoporosis or any of these things, right? Like none of this requires running. Running can help all of those things, but it's not the only way. And for a lot of people, it might not be appropriate. You need to find something that you actually enjoy or you actually want to achieve, or at the very least, like don't hate, that you will do on a fairly regular basis to achieve these bigger goals, right? A guaranteed path to failure is to try and keep just hammering your head into the wall until somehow it sticks, instead of actually trying to pursue something you want to pursue in a way that like fits well into your life. Again, I don't care what your goals are in the sense that you get to choose them. There are a million things to do in this life. And I think we as humans should spend time doing things that are joyful and meaningful and purposeful, and hopefully like all three and more if you can find that. I feel very lucky to like have a job that allows me to do all those things at once. Because before, like most people, I've worked many jobs that like I find those things in different pockets. But your goals have to match your actions, or else you're just asking to be disappointed. If you want to get faster, then you have to commit to speed work. If you want to avoid injury, then you have to be proactive at the first sign of twinges and and if you have rehab exercises to do, then you have to actually do them probably every day. And if you want to avoid nausea or whatever issues that you have with your gut on an ultra, then you probably have to get your hydration dialed in, because as much as people tell me that my hydration's fine, that's not the problem. It's always the problem. And as soon as we figure that out, then it at the very least improves. So we either need to do a sweat test or a lot of testing and reiterating for like how much fluid you're going to take if you just can't get on the scale for very real reasons. And probably both. Like even if you do a sweat test, it's still going to be a lot of testing and reiterating. But we have to get all this shit dialed in if you don't want to have that. Sometimes the outcome requires stuff that you don't love. I'm not a huge fan of like figuring out hydration and messing with it and playing with bottles and figuring out how many carbs we need and going up and down and doing these things. I find it super tedious, but it's like 5 minutes of work that allows me to actually run well. And so we either need to change the goal or suck it up and do the process work, or hopefully find a way to actually enjoy it. Like speed work, hard. I made a flippant post the other week that I kind of talked about, where it's like, um, being faster is great, but getting faster sucks. And I do kind of believe that. I think it shouldn't be miserable. You shouldn't feel like you're being tortured, because you don't need to push to 100% in order to make progress. But it probably isn't going to feel the best. One of the defining factors of lactate intervals is that it produces lactate, which means you have hydrogen ions flowing through your legs, which doesn't feel great. It's burny. One of the defining features of a VO2 max interval is you can't breathe super well, which doesn't feel great. And we have to push into those if we really care about getting faster. If not, that's fine. But you can either say, like, yeah, like if we hate it that much, we have a few options. Again, you don't have to do it and say, you know what? Fuck it. This isn't worth it. I'm not doing this anymore. I just want to run slow and easy and enjoy the woods. You can also say, and it's only an hour a week, I can suffer that long to get faster. You can also kind of fall in love with the process, because for a lot of people, once we see progress, then as you get faster week in and week out, and then maybe take a back week because we're not going to make progress every week, but then month after month we see ourselves getting faster. You can kind of fall in love with it in the sense that like it's doing something, it's cool. But what's going to really cause problems is when we end up in this very common rhetoric or story where you miss speed work and it's like, oh, I missed speed work today because I had something to do and it came up, like something come up. It's a one-off. Like I'll get to it next week. I'll make sure I won't miss it next week. And then you do that every week for 2 months, and then you wonder why you're like 6 hours off your goal pace. Over exaggeration, but still, that's going to lead to disappointment. It just is. And again, I'm not here, as I've said 1,000 times, because I do think it's important, because I think the internet like weaponizes a version of this message that you're kind of a piece of shit if you don't work hard and if you don't have the same goals as everybody else, whatever. That doesn't matter. I'm not here to tell your goals. I'm here to support you in achieving them, but you have to have your goals aligned with the work you're willing and able to put in, or else at the end of it, you're just going to be super disappointed. If you want any advice in that, please don't hesitate to message me. That's what I'm here for. That's why I put my face on the internet. Otherwise, I'm a really introverted person. This is always kind of awkward for me. So, like, the best place is going to be an email or in an Instagram DM. There's other places. You can text my phone number if you have it. That's actually the best, but I'm not going to just speak it into the ether in case the AI robots take it. I make these things to be helpful. So if you want some help, great. If you don't need it, no stress. Hope you have a great day and you have some fun on the trails.